the prior playbook on how we would evaluate CEOs. Board doing a CEO search would be, what's the P&L accountability? Scale, scope, growth, right? What have they done in the past? What's the scale of that business? What are the levers? Did they manage SG&A? Did they get market share? And that will kind of give you a certain perspective. What I'm starting to see in the conversations now in the boardroom are on more difficult things to measure. Learning agility is one of these that keeps coming up. Has the executive shown a track record of pivoting to new business models, as an example?
Hi, this is Stacey Harris.
And this is Terry Zipper, and we're the host of the two podcasts under the HR Huddle.
On Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, we uncover the latest trends, truths, and challenges from Sapient Insight Group's groundbreaking research and our analyst insights, serving up everything you need to know about HR tech with no sugarcoating.
And on HR We Have a Problem, we tackle the toughest workplace challenges head on, offering you expert advice and actionable solutions to help HR leaders thrive in today's fast-changing world. Whether you want the scoop on tech or tools to solve people problems, we've got you covered.
Take a listen and subscribe. If you want to become part of our community, we'd love to see you.
Welcome back to the Meg and Amy Show. Today we are interviewing Gustavo Alba. Gustavo is a partner at Heidrick & Struggles, and he's co-global managing partner of the private equity and venture capital practice. He specializes in placing CEOs, board members, and senior leaders at PE-backed companies, with a particular focus on professional services and tech-enabled organizations. Before joining H&S, Gustavo was head of global recruiting at Booz & Company and founded his own executive search firm. He's been at the forefront of how private equity firms are evolving their approach to leadership as they navigate the AI transformation of services business. Today, we're going to dive into why the leadership playbook that worked yesterday might just not work tomorrow. So before we dive in, you have shared that you're 50% Dominican and 50% Serbo-Croatian, and you're still hunting for others with that combination. That's got to give you a unique perspective on diversity and global talent. How has that background shaped how you think about search, executive search in particular?
It's a great question. I hadn't thought about it from that angle, Amy. I would say a couple of things come to mind. One is from early on, I felt very comfortable being different in most, if not all, settings. So when growing up, being in Dominican Republic or visiting family from Dominican Republic, there was the connotation of, and he's half European view. And then when we would go visit family in what was Yugoslavia and then obviously Serbia and Croatia after, there was the perspective of, oh, that's the branch of the family that went to the Caribbean randomly enough, right? So, and then growing up later on in the United States, I was neither from the U.S., the Caribbean, or Europe. So it was, I really enjoyed it. I probably because I won I would call the parent lottery ticket. I honestly kind of have the best two parents anyone could ask for. That just fit me really well. Supportive, believed in me, but gave kind of enough rope to be my own person. And because of that, they kind of made it easy to feel different, but be very comfortable with it to date. So I've enjoyed it quite a bit. And I do remember a strange story. Professionally grew up in Miami and then moved to New York with a management consulting firm. And they pulled several aside and said, hey, we have this Hispanic diversity group and we'd like you to be a part of it. And I really, and this is early 2000s. And I remember thinking, I was like, wow, like, what is this? What exactly does this mean? I just thought of myself as one of the group, and now there's this carved out group of others, quote unquote, like me. And it was both interesting and gave a different perspective. So yeah, I've enjoyed that background and kind of running through the world with it.
Yeah, well, now I see why you and Meg have bonded so much, is because she believes that she's an outsider as well. It's part of her identity. So
yeah, I think you're a great candidate for my book. One of these days I'm going to write a book about the advantage of being an outsider. One thing I'm really curious about, Gustavo, so which parent was from which place?
Yes, father, Dominican Republic. So my mother from Yugoslavia, her dad, Serbian, her mother, Croatian.
Oh, wow. So multiple
layers of complexity there, yeah. And of course, they met in college in New York.
And you are the United Nations, all wrapped up into your own self, right?
Exactly.
Oh,
That's
love
exactly
it.
right.
All right, so let's get into the meat of it all. How about that? You've been placing star CEOs in PE-backed companies for years. But as you consider the new AI economy, you've shared that you're recognizing that talent profiles really need to evolve. What's changed?
What hasn't changed, maybe the right word. I'll try to keep it practical, because you can imagine with all of this new technology, there's so much kind of what's going out there in the future. So if at any point you kind of see me heading towards the sci-fi 5, 10, 20 years out, bring me back, but I'll try to keep it what we're seeing kind of today and in the near term and the difference. So a couple of things. One is the rate of change that we've already seen in the last 12 months, I have not seen in my 20 plus years of being in and around the talent function. And I think Amy and Meg, it comes from a couple of different perspectives. So one is, as we're thinking about what you're able to do now with AI and the AI technology, you're able to a bit reimagine what the future might look like in a business. So headline number one, I think it's going from what I would have said the last 10, 15 years were operators of a business to now real full out transformers of a business. And to get practical with it, what does that mean? You're now going to be able, and you're already starting to be able to do things like, if you think about an organization today, you have kind of people, your software / technology, and then your product or your capability or your manufacturing, depending on what business model you're in. So let's use a classic services business where you would charge for a certain capability, a certain service to a client. The levers you had to pull as a CEO were, how do I get differentiated labor? How do I enable that labor to do the work in a certain way? And then the last 20 years has been the labor arbitrage of, can I put them in a different location that the cost is less over time, right? And everyone's kind of played around a little bit with those levers. Now we're seeing the fact that you can put a side-by-side AI enablement in the workforce. So how do you put an AI tool, an AI bot for the human and the human workforce to deliver that work in a faster way? That's already here, and I think most of us are already starting to leverage either company-owned AI type products and or ChatGPT or Perplexity or pick your type. So that's already happening and is happening today. As well, we're starting to see obviously a lot of the native AI workforce itself being deployed. I think Jensen at NVIDIA famously said, maybe it was like 6 or 12 months ago, I expect kind of a human workforce headcount to remain somewhat stable, go up a bit more, but my AI workforce to be something in the, I think, hundreds of thousands was his comment, both physical and software AI enablement. So you package all of this up, and all of a sudden, your limiting factors before were people, engineering, and software. As a CEO, you were kind of limited a bit by that. And now those are at your disposal somewhat if you can kind of rethink and recreate your business. And happy to share different examples we're seeing in the market and how private equity and venture are kind of thinking about these businesses. But I've never been so excited and a bit energized around what's going to happen around the corner, around all these businesses.
So I love that idea that to be successful in the C-suite, in the past, it was, a known set of tools and levers and a strong operator profile. And now you still need a strong operator profile, but you also need a transformer profile, someone who can equip an organization to change in a way that might be uncomfortable for them or might be exploring new paths and new tools to bring that together. Tell me a little bit about how organizations and specifically boards who are looking at these C-suite CEO leaders to be these transformers, how are boards thinking about what does that look like? What would that entail, and how do they know it when they see it, when it's something new? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, and this is what we're all chasing and guiding a lot of our clients, and these conversations, Meg, are ongoing as we speak. So let me tackle that with the kind of prior playbook on how we would evaluate CEOs and how we're starting to look at them recently and going forward. So to your point, the prior kind of framework on it, board doing a CEO search would be, what's the P&L accountability? Scale, scope, growth, right? What have they done in the past? What's the scale of that business? What are the levers? Did they manage SG&A? Did they get market share? And that will kind of give you a certain perspective. You would look into, to be fair, the last 15, 20 years, we have been in a bit of a digital enablement, digital transformation per se. And we've been doing it, let's call that without the AI toolkit. So if you think about the software business, the cloud business, the mobile business, right? Those were all very large digital transformations. How do we take our customers to that? How do we enable our organizations internally to use that? So let's all classify as, has that executive led through any of those digital transformations, and have they done that successfully or not? And then I would say the other dimension, which we can talk about inputs versus output, the other output is successful exit or not. Were there an IPO, a strategic sale, if it's private equity, did it transact to another secondary buyer? Very kind of black or white, was it successful or not? So let's bucket that into the prior playbook we would all more or less test against. What I'm starting to see in the conversations now in the boardroom are on more difficult things to measure. Learning agility is one of these that keeps coming up. So has the executive shown a track record of pivoting to new business models, as an example? And obviously, at enterprise, at scale, harder to prove. But if you kind of go over their arc of their 10, 20, 30, 40-year career, can we point to examples where they really recreated a bit of new business models, as the famous Peter Thiel 0 to 1? Have they just kind of on the edge kind of got everything better, or have they really been able to kind of create new ideas, new models, new processes, as an example?
And so would that be like, for example, in software on-premise to SaaS, or something bigger? Like what's an example there?
Yeah, so an example of that, the on-premise to SaaS is a good one. And let's stay with that one. The on-premise to SaaS of a business, if it just stayed around the efficiency of that business, I'd call that classic old guard, check, digital transformation, Amy. If the transformation from on-prem to cloud enabled a new business offering in the market to a customer, to a client, to a new business line, that's more what we're looking for at scale. Because they were able to kind of release out of the on-prem and they got more flexibility, what did they then go do with that?
Yeah, that fits really well with one of the previous conversations that Meg and I have had in terms of the business model shift, because a lot of that shift from on-premise to SaaS was just about cloudifying existing processes. Correct. And not about innovating based on what new possibilities exist. And this is all about new possibilities exist, because if we just focus on efficiency, like we basically have no employees and a bunch of hollow companies, right?
And let's use, I'll give you like examples that are going on right now in the market. I don't know if you saw what are we calling it now? Solo founder AI native example, Base 44, if you've been following that. They went live end of 2024, beginning of 2025, right? The concept of vibe coding, no code, no fixed code. In 4 or 5 months, 300,000 users, and they just transacted to Wix, right? It's all public, $80 million transaction. And solo founder, smaller team over time. But that's a great example, Amy and Meg, of that's not in the future. That's 2025. Someone sat there and thought, wait a minute, I can build an AI native business to tackle problems that in the past, we would have built a whole infrastructure.
And that was like 9 months, right? Wasn't it? Beginning door to door kind of a thing.
Door to door, 9 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wild. Another example, like to highlight all that's going on, Harvey AI. I don't know if you've been keeping up with that example, but Harvey AI is one of the first, I would call kind of AI native vertical services business. They've gone after the legal space using AI, serving both, general counsels and law firms to provide kind of enablement of legal and legal support, and which makes sense. If you think about legal is such a structured approach to it, an if then that dynamic, and they've gone after that, and they've reported they just raised another 300 million round at 5 billion valuation. They're plus or minus 2 or 3 years kind of officially in the market. So you're just seeing, back to your original question, Amy, these new ways to approach a client or a customer set that is kind of completely decoupled from what needed to be done 18 months ago.
So are you following the C-suite individuals that you place, and like, do you have any indicators of whether they are actually transfer? I mean, I know it's super early days, but are you seeing examples of where they are taking transformations forward? Because it's one thing to start a new company in this AI world, AI native, but to take a legacy company and to transform it into an AI company is a whole different thing. So have you started to see people doing this?
Early days is the headline, Amy, and this is probably why I'm as excited as ever in doing what I do, because the next 18, 24, 36 months is trying to crack exactly this problem where I'll give you another example of what we're seeing, especially in the private equity space. But this question of, there's those folks who will do it in AI native ways, and the market will deem if they're successful or not. But there's a bigger population of executives who have resided and lived and done digital transformations and been successful, let's call it, in a pre-ChatGPT era, for lack of a better word, So now the question is, what are those traits? What are those things that will lead at scale, not one off, to make these transformation? Jury's out. It's inning one of that story, and I think firms like ours at Heidrick and others are chasing exactly this to try to figure out what are those traits, what are those competencies that we can identify a bit at any scale versus one off, but still too early days.
So recently I read a few articles and seen a few videos, and there's been a little bit of pushback in the market that to truly understand what's possible with these tools and to be able to leverage them to their fullest extent, you need to have a level of technical proficiency you didn't used to need to be an effective leader. And the pushback specifically that I'm referring to was a pushback against McKinsey, who was bringing forward some points of view around transformation, but without it being grounded in technical proficiency. So I guess my question to you is, how are these leaders recognizing, boards and individual CEOs, recognizing the elevated need for technical proficiency? And are they looking to either build that proficiency themselves or bring that in as part of their transformation effort? What are they understanding today about their technical proficiency needs? And then within private equity, how are they thinking about that as they create these transformational value plans?
So the second one's a little easier, the PE. The first one, Meg, is really, your question is a great one, and I'll give you my opinion. It's early days on it. On the private equity, this is interesting, that second question, which is, if you think about AI and enablement as a massive value creation lever, how is it being applied? So a couple of things. One is, you're seeing this so if you take a step back, the playbook the last 20, 30 years for private equity has clearly been capital, financial engineering, and then let's call it classic value ops levers. Pricing, supply chain, etc.
Market.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So the playbook has been incredibly successful, applied at different scales and different subsectors. I'm starting to see these hybrids come up in different submarkets. I'll talk about one very specific, which is the services people market, which you can imagine people-based businesses, professional services. We talked about legal, IT services, cyber, human capital, search, take anything that's people oriented. You're getting very creative, and some of these are public, so happy to share because they're out publicly around it. So you've had companies like, there's a private equity firm called ZBS. They're backed by Thrive Capital, by Bessemer, and they're a bit of this hybrid of bringing the best of venture, kind of long arc of history or long arc of viewpoints, technology fluency, capital, with a private equity mentality of, we're going to take what was a people-intensive business, which venture didn't really want to go play there, and how do we kind of apply it at any scale? So ZBS has built a really fantastic accounting business called Crete, and they've applied this kind of framework. They're up, overnight 500 plus million, using M&A, using a lot of emerging tech to really crack the code on mid to back office offering around this market. You're seeing Cosla, Thrive, General Catalyst, all in this kind of AI enablement of, let's call it old guard types of businesses in the past to AI infuse it. So I think it's going to be an amazing run, Meg, back to your point around can we, but it's interesting, they don't want to buy too big of a business that is kind of so set in their way of doing things that they can't disrupt themselves. But can they buy and roll up businesses that are more agile because of their size and scale? Can you get a 2, 3, $400 million businesses, AI enable those and scale it, versus going off and buying a 3, 4, $5 billion business and everything that's ingrained in it. So that thesis is out there. There's several others I can't highlight because they're not out in the public, of this hybrid of venture/PE, and the thought is we'll bring capital and AI engineering, i.e. deployment engineers, and go apply it. And you're starting to see this in OpenAI. Just came out 2-3 weeks ago. I don't know if you saw the building a consulting services business on top of their LLMs. So I think they're going to kind of invest quite a bit in the space. Obviously, Palantir has been head and shoulders above everyone in this kind of services with AI enablement LLM combination. So I think it's going to be a massive race to try to figure out how do you put all of these things together and do really neat things to attack these old guard businesses we've all been just kind of accustomed to doing.
Yeah, it's interesting because when SaaS came up, of course, there was a lot of acquisitions of SaaS companies into legacy on premise, right? Oracle and SAP in particular bought SaaS-based companies to meet the need, and also theoretically to infuse that knowledge and capability into their DNA. Questionable if it worked or not, having been part of it. But do you think it's different, or is that like the same? That's the same playbook that we can play again, or are there different circumstances, or did it never work at all in the first place?
I think it's a good analogy. I would say the let's call it on-prem classic software to SaaS. In our lifetime, we all thought that was probably the leap we'd see.
Isn't that so cute? Back when we thought that was a big deal, yeah.
Right? I mean, we really did. And I would say the biggest difference in that analogy, Amy, is just this is so, you can do so many things we just had no idea we could do at such scale. So let me give you an example of things, I think about in our world, which is, executive recruiting. If you think about how do we connect the right talent with the right opportunity, right? And make that happen. I envision, so there are certain things that happen that we right now do what I would call hand-to-hand combat a bit. That is, we try to tackle how do we identify talent at scale that have certain career inflection points, right? So we get to know talent, and then one thing we all do is try to see what are key career inflection points, IPOs, M&As, succession, they did or didn't get the CEO role, or a key leader left their organization, right? These are all inflection points that we look for in order to entice them on an opportunity potentially, or a career switch. And we have certain tools and data and analytics, but in this new world, you can only imagine, you can be able to identify those inflection points at scale in a much better way that's coming all our ways. And even maybe before they happen, i.e., could you, Amy, let's say if I'm monitoring you, quote unquote, on your career, and I start to notice certain patterns around your LinkedIn graph on who you connect with more than not, and that's picked up, that might send a signal of certain things, or you post certain blogs about certain topics, right? And now via AI and machine learning at scale, I'm able to kind of identify that a bit more. So use that as an example of really leveraging next gen AI to figure that out. And tied into that, one of my passions is imagine predictive fit, right? So this is something where right now we use our assessments, we use intuition, we use referencing, we use back channels, and it's good, right? It minimizes risk as much as we humanly can, and that's kind of what we do for a living. But if you can apply some AI enablement to that, and I think this goes back, Meg, to tie it all back together to your original point, can we start to see certain patterns that predict your ability to do things that you and or others just haven't done yet to date? Are there things, Meg, in your background, or Naomi, in your background, where with kind of co-pilot AI, I could put through and figure out the probability of success of you being able to lead this new transformation for this new venture capital PE-backed organization that needs to solve XYZ problem? So I think even in our sliver of the world, you can imagine applying these technologies to solve problems where we've only relied on our own intelligence or intuition with some engineering, and imagine flipping that the other way where it's almost, engineering enabled and human in the loop to craft it. I see that coming around the corner, because that's an example where I think AI enablement could help us at scale.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the back channel, and so we've heard stories about the the PE placement back channel. So I was wondering, what's a knockout that you could get from the back channel, or a knock in for that matter, and is that something that you believe could be kind of sort of automated and maybe remove some of the bias or not? I don't know. Anyway, what do you think?
So I got a lot of opinions here.
Yes.
Hey.
Yes.
So I see and understand why in the last, let's say, 15, 20 years, that method we've all applied, and especially to your point, Amy, in private equity, even more so than I would say public. The back channeling, the gathering data has been one of these predictive indicators of future success. But if you think about it, that's because I think if you go backwards 15 years, what everybody's back channeling, Amy, is the very specific playbook. Let's assume Meg is our candidate and we're back channeling.
Oh, I like it.
The questions
I can tell you a lot. I can give you a lot of back channel on her.
Exactly. But the questions would be around, has Meg led a business of X size? Has she digitally transformed that business into Y result? Yes or no? How has she led teams through that transformation or through that initiative? Has it resulted in a successful or unsuccessful transaction? Right? There's a bit of a framing of it, and what we're all hoping there is kind of the past equals the future in it, right? And there's obviously a lot of nuances to the left and to the right of that, but that's kind of the core. And private equity has leveraged that in a very kind of tight-knit community, hence the back channeling around, hey, we're about to buy this portfolio company, we're thinking about Meg, you worked with her in Y portfolio before, here are my dynamics, here's my value creation, let's talk about if you think Meg can do it or not. So remove that. All we're trying to do there is the predictive fit, if this is right for Meg or not. So I get why we did it in the past, but now if tying in the earlier discussion, if we really think there's a set of, let's call it, classic businesses that won't transform that much and will follow a certain playbook that we've seen in the past, okay, I still believe doing all of those things interesting and useful and directionally manages risk. But in a world where you're starting to tackle a lot of these undefined first to be created categories around these problem sets. I don't think those back channels they're going to give you some indicators. Yes, it's valuable. It's better than nothing. Yes. But I think we all kind of owe it to ourselves to get better around how to leverage these data algorithms and fit to try to see if there's certain patterns in how people think, how people work, how people behave, and putting them in the right situation. Because if we do that, you kind of have a happier, more successful executive, a happier, very financially rewarding board and investors, on and on. There's just so much goodness that if we get this better fit, we can guide people's careers and their decision making in better ways. So valuable today. It was very valuable in the past, valuable today, but kind of shrinking as we speak in its value going forward.
And I think we think about this a lot because the idea that the success criteria in that old playbook was built on a series of foundational assumptions that aren't necessarily true anymore. We've started to feel this even before AI came with the post-ZERP economy. And in software, we had built a lot of assumptions about cost of capital that caused us to grow at any cost and try to just capture market share with no sense of needing to think about profitability or EBITDA or any of those things. And then all of a sudden the music stopped and everybody was like, hold on, you want me to be profitable, but I've never built any skills around profitability. I've built all my skills on growth. And what does that mean for me when I've built a tremendous amount of skill against a playbook that's not viable anymore? And I think AI is doing that to us again. One thing that I would like to ask you about, Gustavo, is this idea of role shifting. So maybe within the C-suite, we're starting to see more of these hybrid-y roles emerge. And I think they follow a similar pattern where we used to see for early digital transformation, we'd get a chief digital officer or something like that. But now we're starting to hear things like a people leader that's also in charge of technology, or an operational leader that's also an AI strategist. Like, how do you think about these emerging roles as not just templates for what other businesses need to be, but about the idea that businesses are having to be more thoughtful about their organization structure at the top of the house? What have you seen there, and how is that emerging for you?
Yeah, no, this is, again, we can have a whole podcast, I think, just on this topic. You're exactly right, Meg. It's shifting and changing. So the high level where we're at today, I would say, is you kind of have, let's call it your classic officers, your CFO, your chief legal officer, your CEO. Let's put that in the, we can debate if it should be structured in that way or not, but let's just put that off to the side because that's a little easier to put off to the side. And then almost everything else is in the, oh boy, everything else bucket. So what we started to see is this kind of, let's call it chief technology officer, but it's a Uber technology or president technology you're starting to see. And in there will sit digital, the kind of old CIO function, back office, mid office, customer technologists. So this kind of super Uber technologist who's able to kind of pull the thread on everything going on in AI and digital, and then all the infrastructure and things we need to do to enable our workforce. You're starting to see that almost in put in one. The second is, let's call it the chief revenue, chief growth, go-to-market officer. You're starting to see those, and this has been moving that direction ever since really the SaaS boom, where they're really kind of owning anything that is kind of hitting the client, the customer, renewals, and everything such forth. So that we're seeing there. And tucked under there, you'll see the chief customer officer, the support team, renewals, all of that under the kind of high-powered CRO. And then the CHRO function, we're seeing blends of sometimes you're seeing them as CAO, Chief Administrative Officer. Well, they'll tuck in things like real estate, infrastructure, kind of tucked into that at times. And then there's the famous COO, which honestly means everything and nothing. It's a reflection of what the CEO, the board, and the strategy and the business model that they want to go after, I've seen. So that one tends to be the most up in the air and can be shaped accordingly quite a bit. The headline is, and we do this quite a bit with boards and CEOs, especially when new CEOs come in, which is if you line up what the strategy is, the market you're going after, and the business model, from there then becomes what's the right design for your sector, your business that you're in. And also, I think it's less talked about, also a reflection on that CEO, Meg, meaning we see CEOs who are spike in commercial, and we'll see other CEOs who spike in strategy, and we'll see other CEOs who spike in technology or product or classic CFO, CEO, right? So we've also had that conversation quite a bit with the boards, which is almost impossible to have this Da Vinci CEO who does all of these things. Therefore, if you anchor in around that strength that you have in your CEO, you then should think about then how do you complement that team and the organization around it. What makes it really interesting is then market shifts and then CEO succession shifts, and then all of those things are back in the game of the Rubik's Cube of figuring out how to put. But I do think this is, other than CEO succession, which clearly needs to be the number one thing boards kind of think about every day, closely right behind it, Meg, is this question of how do I translate that organizationally based on what's going on in the market with all these changes going on, and then who's my CEO and how am I complementing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's all about the teaming, right? Yeah.
It is. It is. Now, the wild part, I would say, Amy, is the level of change. The last 20 years, it's always, change, technologies, change, we've all heard it. But you talk to all of these executives, especially on the technology front, these last 12 months are just
like 16 years and 12 months, right?
And I mean, I do this for a living, and I'm constantly talking to executives in the flow, and I can't. It's honestly one of the first few times I'm like, I can't even keep up with the level of things that are going on in the market in real time, and then it's almost like if you looked backwards, right, and you said, it's as if I was in 2012, 2013, and you figured out, cloud, SaaS, that's going to take off great. But here, that's happening at scale everywhere. And, we gave the base 44 example, and it feels like every week different people are coming up with these different ideas and models, and you're like, yes, of course.
It makes complete sense.
You need to go spend $1 million on engineers, right? You can kind of
or $100 million, I guess, if you're Facebook.
Right? So it's just, and Meg, you'll appreciate this. Krishnan Rajagopalan was our CEO at Hydric. Very forward-looking, always kind of thinking about some of these trends. ChatGPT happened. We had a meeting, and we're like, this is it. Like the AI talent, the wave is coming. We got geared up in 2023, and we met up. It was probably spring of 2024, and we're like, where is the hiring? Why aren't people hiring at scale, given what we know is going on in the market. And we couldn't, remember, we like called around to AI experts. And we're like, when is it happening? They were like, it'll catch on. But we couldn't understand why the phone wasn't ringing off the hook for AI talent and AI enablement. Now, obviously, we're in a full out just
Right.
insanity. But
It's sort of like the tsunami, right? You see the water recede and you're like, maybe we should move.
and Meg, but to use that, I think about that example because we sat there and we're like, but we're ready and we're it's not happening. And I think about that now looking out, thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much that's gonna, if you just play out this movie and all of these things are happening on a daily, weekly basis, what does this all look like down the road? Are we all gonna come back on in 2 years and say, I can't believe we used to use the back channels by picking up phones and hey, what do you think about Meg? And did Meg perform well there or not? And that was quote unquote our referencing, right? At scale. Will we look back at that and say, we used to make multi-million, billion-dollar decisions because these are the executives running these businesses. And that was our version of, de-risking.
I want to go back to the characteristics. You had mentioned learning agility as being one of these sort of difficult to measure, but really key. And then I think you actually did give a really good definition of how to look at it. But I'm thinking about other characteristics, and if you look in the news in the markets, CEOs are getting accolades when they go after efficiency, when they're just making cuts to staff and saying it's for AI, right? But they're getting boosts, they're getting accolades, maybe some threats from from the regular people, but for the business to thrive, it's becoming clear that what really needs to happen is more of a focus on innovation and transformation, and that might create a bit of a penalization in the market. Plus, it's really hard. It's a lot harder to create a transformation than it is to just cut staff and say it's because of AI. That makes me think that the CEOs of today need to be brave. Is that one of the characteristics you're looking for?
It is. There's this, the classic one, right, is Bezos when Amazon. How long did he yell off the top of the roof, like, we're doing something different and I don't care, public markets, what do you think about the way I reinvest and do all of these things? And he was obviously, in the arc of time, he was clearly correct on it. I think that's, I would say it's brave, Amy. I would almost translate it into this ability to, maybe we call it vision to execution bridge, is the way I would classify it. And what I mean by that is you're able to see where things are heading out in that 3, 5, 7 year period, vision, strategy. But that bridge to execution, the realities, to your earlier point, of the practicality of there's this market, it's short-term, quarterly focused. You need to kind of manage that tension point accordingly to kind of take the organization there. So your ability to manage that as one of your stakeholders, put that off to the side. Your ability to manage the workforce through that, over that 3, 5, 7 years, kind of put that as another key stakeholders. Your ability to manage your client set through that transformation is another one. So I almost view these future CEOs on an ability to be agile, set strategy kind of through execution, but then practically manage those stakeholders kind of along for that ride. Mm-hmm. And that's not an easy thing because of the tension points, to your point, are wildly at conflict with each other throughout it. And I also think you're going to see that in any, it's the innovator's dilemma, right? Any business at any scale that's done it 20, 50 years in certain ways, now managing that, you need all of those stakeholders need to kind of come through with you for that ride. So you need to kind of paint for them why some of this is happening, why some of the short-term pain that they may feel through that ride needs to happen as well. So I think that skill is going to be even more in demand than it has been in a world where, Meg, going back to your setup earlier, the last 15, 20 years, pre-COVID, stable set of capital out there in the market, you can allocate a kind of very step change oriented, big waves of disruption, but all kind of within a framework of technology that we can all move in. So that took a certain type of maybe vision with a capital V, Amy, versus I think what we're heading into, which is I think more transformational. It's kind of pre-internet in my mind to internet and that move. So I think it's being able to do that. And we didn't even get into what's the impact on really neat things we haven't, even begun to crack with the hard sciences and healthcare and physical AI and robotics. I didn't want to go down that route and so I think because it's really, it feels more futuristic, and I actually do think it's a bit more futuristic in nature, and it'll take a bit to play out, while all of the conversations we're having, it's like now in the market. I think, we'll look back and from this point to 2 years, and I think we'll have massive players that didn't move and weren't nimble enough through this period that will not be able to keep up.
Are there any last kind of like survival tips for CEOs and C-suites that you want to end on, Gustavo?
So I am completely convinced and would bet everything that you have to be able to, at a minimum, be AI enabled, Amy. So I do think there's a lot of buzz out there around, and this isn't just obviously CEOs, but everybody in the executive team and down, which is, is AI going to take a lot of jobs and job displacements and yes-ish, but I think new ones will be created. I do think what's for certain is those who are able to use AI to enable to them to perform versus those who don't use AI to do their job. And I think if you're a CEO and you are not playing with these tools I'll leave you with the final thing. I can't share who it is, but it is a client. This is the first I've heard. They've just stood up a AI board member. So it's a board member, AI, it's an AI bot. It has all the data, all the information you can imagine from the external market, competitors, all of these things. And it's fed all the data that the board is fed. And there's a lot of data, Meg, as you know. And imagine this AI board member sits side by side with the other, 9 board members and is part of the dialogue. Hey, let's bring in the AI board member into this discussion around what's going to happen in geopolitics or expanding this product versus this service offering versus pricing. And it's been rave reviews by the...
I can imagine both the ability to take, ingest all of the long view and all of the different perspectives, as well as participate in the conversation. Yeah, that would be a really solid perspective opportunity to have that access.
It sounds a little bit like Megbot, which is how we would characterize Meg. So, like very, like tons and tons of knowledge and wisdom, pretty irritating. No, I'm kidding. So, but.
It's funny because it's true, right?
Okay, Leadership Corner. You ready?
Ready.
Okay, so here is the question. One of my previously high-performing leaders is struggling with our AI transformation. They built their reputation on deep expertise, but now they need to work alongside AI and think more strategically. How do I help them transition without losing them? That seems very similar to what you were just talking about, Gustavo.
Wow. Yeah. So I think this is, classic change management 101, Amy, where, we've rewarded, if you think about it to date, expertise, and especially certain depth of expertise. Engineering expertise has been in demand, software engineering expertise, et cetera. And the reality is now we have a tool in a really good way that kind of evens out the playing field across the board. So I think this is one where I have a mentee. This reminds me a little bit of this. So I have a mentee who 2 years ago, I've been on his case. He's a software engineer around using AI enablement in his code and QA, et cetera, et cetera. And I would check in with him every 6 months, and it was no, it's not so good. It's buggy. I waste more time than me doing it. All of that. I said, great. Is it getting better? Yeah, but not so good. Okay, give me a grade. D+. Okay. 6 months I would check again. No, still you're wrong. Give me a grade. C-. And it's now where he's all of a sudden like, yeah, this thing is pretty good at making me a better software engineer. And, we then played the what happens down the road. So I would suggest, Amy, a version of that where being very direct with this executive of a bit of that framing old world, new world. We're stepping in, we're in the new world, 1 foot in, early days. So not too late, obviously, to kind of catch up and be in the forefront, but there's no going back. So you can't make them use it, but kind of time's ticking. And if you don't, it's going to be harder in a year, 2 or 3. So I think framing it in ways that are both direct, but somewhat accurate. And this is, I think, what a lot of the leaders should do on this transformation of the human capital, which is there is no choice. We're heading to this, and if you don't, our competitors will use these tools to do things in better, faster, cheaper ways.
Yeah, and I think you make an incredible point there, which is we've never seen improvement happen so fast. It's never been like this, right? So it is true in the past that, you could have tried a tool and said, no, doesn't work, and be right for a while. And now it doesn't last.
Yeah, so I completely agree. This is a classic change management problem. And I always encourage us, whenever you're faced with resistance to change specifically, that really when you dig deeper, it's fear, right? It's fear because it's embedded in the question. The person has deep expertise. And so there's a recognition that, hey, AI is going to replace me and all of that. And so I don't think that you resolve fear with a hammer, but I do think you do resolve it with a little bit, more tough love in some way. And so some of the tactics that I would encourage at this point would be to pair this senior leader with a bit of a reverse mentor, somebody who's eager and anxious to learn from their expertise, but also really inclined to try new tools and new things. And so you could, sort of pair up that energy and help forge a path together. And then the other thing I would do for this leader is make the problem bigger. Instead of telling them they need to use AI on something they're already really good at, ask them to help with something that's new, that has no preconceived path, or that is something that they've never gotten a chance to get to, and give them permission to get to it if they include AI with that. So that, again, you're not putting more pressure on the area of fear, but you're building a scaffolding to the opportunity.
You always come up with the best shit, Meg. So irritating. See, I told you, Gustavo.
Yes. It's because I have 2 children, not 1. And so I've had more time, more reps at this.
Well, you've been wonderful, Gustavo. She's irritating, but you are amazing. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, this was delightful and exactly what I was hoping, which was to learn more about kind of where the C-suite is, which is farther along than I had anticipated. So, I think it's going to be fun to see where we go from here, for sure.
Yeah, we'll check back in a couple months and everything will have changed.
Yeah, exactly.
Another great one in the books, Meg.
So interesting. So interesting how all of our conversations are starting to kind of have some overlap, right?
Yeah, we're starting to develop some theses.
Yeah, and several of our guests talking about the innovator's dilemma. So I thought that was an interesting one as well.
We still continue to enjoy the leadership questions that come in. So please do send your questions or just the situations that you're having, and we can formulate a question. And as always, please share this episode if you enjoyed it. Share everything and anything, and do subscribe if you haven't already.
Yes, we appreciate all the help, all the follows on LinkedIn, and all of the ideas. So as Amy said, please do continue to send us new questions and things that you're struggling with or pondering, because that really helps inform our content calendar. But in the meantime, let's invent the future together, everyone. I believe in us.
Let's make every day count.